Greetings, everybody. Hope that you're having a good day. And today we're going to be talking about the geography of Israel, what the land looks like. And it's the last of the lessons that I have planned that will proceed are actually delving into the New Testament. If you haven't already viewed the number 4 lesson that's called Maps, it might be helpful for you to look at that before you proceed with this one, only because we've sort of, in that lesson, we located Israel on the globe to describe exactly not only where it was, but how it compared in size to the nations that surrounds it. It's a tiny nation. It only accounts for 1% of the Middle East. That's how tiny it is. Israel is in the Middle East, and you might legitimately ask, the middle of what? Why the Middle East? But we need to look at it from a European perspective. To the Europeans, that area, which includes 18 countries of Asia, plus Egypt, which is on the continent of Africa, curiously enough, that's the Middle East, but it's not the Far East. And it's not obviously Europe or the West. So that's how it came to be known as the Middle East. As I said before, Israel is a tiny nation. I'm going to hold up this map so you can see what the shape of it is. It's sort of shaped like a crazy kind of looking triangle. And it could be one reason why you don't find very many maps that really show all of Israel in one shot because it's so long and skinny, and the southern part of it is all desert. So that might be one reason why it's not shown in its complete shape at any one time. As I said, it's 1% of the total land of the Middle East. Its size and population are equivalent to our state of New Jersey. And you could drive from north to south very easily in an afternoon's time. At its widest, it's 71 miles wide, and it goes all the way down to 15 miles wide at its southern tip. I mentioned before that in Eilat, which is the city that's at the very tip, the southern tip of Israel, you can see both the country of Jordan to the east, and you can see the country of Egypt to the left. It's kind of a neat thing to become aware of. So essentially, Israel is divided up into 4 regions, and I don't want to go into a whole lot of detail because it's not really necessary for us to do that to suit our purposes. But it would help us if we could understand what the geography of Israel is, both today, and obviously it's pretty much the same geography at the time of Jesus. So helping us to understand that will shed some light on the narratives as we go through them in the Gospels. So the central area that runs from north to south, and I'll hold up a map in a minute, hills run down the length of the country. Actually, I hold that map up now. Okay, let me see what I'm showing you. All right. This map is actually an elevation map. You can see that there are some light colored areas and there are some dark colored areas. And the light pinkish orange areas, the very lightest ones are plains or plateaus. As you get darker and darker and darker, then the elevation increases. So if you look way up in the northern part of Israel, you will see that they are very dark orange colors, and that those mountains are high, way above sea level. As a matter of fact, Mount Hermon, at the very northern border of Israel, that borders with Syria, is 9,200 feet above sea level. Mount Hermon, just as an aside, is a bone of contention between the countries of Israel and Syria. Syria would like nothing more than to be able to claim Mount Hermon, because if it belonged to them, then it would give them access to the Mediterranean Sea, which would be very, very important to them. So there have been oftentimes skirmishes on that border between Syria and Israel over that particular area. It would be, if you've heard of the Golan Heights, that northern part of Israel is the Golan Heights. Also, going down through the colors, obviously the blue is water, it's sea level. And the gray areas, which you'll notice surround the Jordan River and south of the Sea of Galilee and all of the Dead Sea, that is below sea level. As a matter of fact, the Dead Sea, the darkest gray area there, is 1,400 feet below sea level. It is the deepest, the lowest place on the surface of the earth. So this map is just kind of interesting, even just showing us the differences in elevation just within the country of Israel. So going down the center of the, sort of like the spine of the country, are hills. And the hills can be divided up into three different ranges. Up in the north, we have the Galilean hills. They are very rugged, steep mountains. They're more mountains than they are hills. And they're separated by some fertile valleys where we could find some vineyards and pastures and orchards. Nazareth is on the western side of those hills, overlooking the coastal plain. The middle part are the Sumerian hills in the area that we know of as Samaria. And those are less steep in that area. And then the Judean hills in the south, which would be where where Jerusalem is located, are sort of described as rolling hills. That's where Jerusalem and Bethlehem would be located. So I'm going to have to set aside my map now because, no, I'll continue. If I have to set the map aside, then it's because I just can't do three things at one time. The western coastal plain would be the second part of the geography of Israel. A plain just refers to a broad, low, flat expanse. And in the western plain in Israel lies between the central hills and the Mediterranean Sea. So that's why it's coastal. It's made up of three plains. The plain in the north is called the plain of Zebulun. The plain of Sharon is the plain that is in the central part, and the plain of Judea is obviously in the south. 70%, more than 2/3 of Israel's population lives in the plains and the coastal area. Kind of interesting that if we compare the area that surrounds Jerusalem, Jerusalem doesn't have an airport. It's not really a center for industry or high-tech companies. It's kind of limited in what it contributes geographically to the area. Obviously, it's extremely important to the three major religions of the world: Christianity, Judaism, and Islam. But as far as being the center of cosmopolitan living, that it is not. That is located in the the Western Plain region. Around Tel Aviv, that's where the airport going into Israel is, in Tel Aviv. Heavy industry is located in this area. All your high-tech companies, a very important industry for Israel, are located in this area, and it has a very good road system, highway system in that area. The climate of that area is very Mediterranean. The summers are dry. The winters are rather rainy from November to March. The temperatures are pretty mild. Snow would be extremely unusual, and if it did snow, it would melt within the same day. The beaches along the Mediterranean Sea are they're white, sandy beaches. I did mention in the maps lesson that we did that if you notice that uh, the the border, the coast along the Mediterranean Sea is very, very smooth. The Mediterranean Sea washes silt up against the coast, and so there are no natural harbors or bays or no peninsulas of land that stick out into the Mediterranean Sea. It's rather unusual. That land in the plains that we're looking at here is rich and fertile soil in the plains. Bountiful grain crops are grown there and citrus groves. You'll see orange, grapefruit, pomelo, and lemon trees in that area. Banana plants, mango, and pomegranate trees grow there. Dates, figs, olives, strawberries are grown there. And then along the Mediterranean coast itself, the Mediterranean coast runs about 116 miles, um, and that is where the city of Tel Aviv is. Now, below this map that you really can't see, but going from this area uh, below the Dead Sea, and going all the way down to Eilat at the southern point of the of Israel, is the Negev Desert. That would be the third uh, geographical area that makes up Israel. And there's no sense me showing you that map because it doesn't show the Negev, does it? Actually, do I have a map that shows the Negev? Well, it would be this area in here. That would be where the Negev desert is. Very, very interesting place. It makes up the reason it's called a desert is because it receives less than 10 inches of rain a year. Vegetation there is very sparse, and yet the desert blooms. And the reason that it does is because there's a layer of soil underneath the sand of the desert. There's a layer of soil that's called loess. It's spelled Loess, but it's pronounced lus. And it's a very fertile, rich soil that, when it's mixed with water, is extremely supportive of vegetation. And curiously enough, underneath this layer of loess is an aquifer made up of brackish water, part fresh and part salty. And so there are salinization plants that have been built all over the desert for the purpose of desalting bringing that water to the surface and mixing it with the loess and providing just very good fertile soil for vegetation to be grown in. The Israelis have even developed plants that survive on that brackish water and are able to grow and eliminate the salt from that brackish water by themselves. It's really rather an amazing development. You see vegetation all over that area. The deserts do indeed bloom, as the scripture told us would happen, that the deserts would bloom. Um, and the fruits and vegetables that are grown there in Israel are harvested, packaged, and shipped to Europe. And it's very possible that patrons of European restaurants are eating vegetables and fruits that were harvested in Israel that very same day. It's rather a remarkable development for such a small nation. There are only 8 million people in Israel, in all of Israel, and we have cities that have more people than 8 million. Um, And then the fourth area is the Rift Valley. And I do need to go back to my map to show you the Rift Valley. I did sort of mention it. It's this gray area that runs right along the east coast of the country of Israel. It's one of the most prominent geographical features on the planet. It can be seen from outer space by orbiting astronauts. Contrary to popular opinion, the orbiting astronauts cannot see the Great Wall of China, but they can identify the Great Rift Valley. That valley lies on a fault line where long ago, probably during the time of Noah's flood or shortly after, two large land masses crashed together and then ripped apart, leaving a rip or a rift in the land. It extends all the way up from the Middle East south into Eastern Africa. I believe that it ends or comes to its end in Kenya. And the Jordan River runs through this gully. I can't think of anything else to call it but a gully. Most of the what you call it, the border, the banks. Most of the banks of the Jordan River are elevated, and the Jordan River runs down through a gully. It's not flat land for the most part. The headwaters are actually in northern Israel at Mount Hermon. Um, that's where and it's just a little brook. You would if you saw the headwaters of the Jordan River, you would hardly think that it would account for such a long and a deep river. So the Jordan River flows down through the Sea of Galilee, which is also called Lake Kinneret. Just to stop to describe the Sea of Galilee, it's shaped like a large bowl. It's bordered by a shallow plain, by flatlands, and then it's surrounded by hills. So it's really kind of shaped like a teacup. And the waters of the Sea of Galilee can either be very calm, sometimes the waters just look like glass, or they can have 20-foot waves that come up suddenly. And the reason that happens is you notice that there are also hills along the Mediterranean Sea in the northern part of Israel, and they block the winds that are coming across the Mediterranean Sea. And when they do come across the Mediterranean Sea, they rush across the plains and the mountains and disturb the waters of the Sea of Galilee, which kind of sheds light on the stories that are part of the Gospels, where the waters of the Sea of Galilee, all of a sudden, the fishermen find themselves in a storm. Of course, the storm that Jesus calmed was a greater storm than the fishermen were ready for. But we will get to that when we go into the Gospels. The Sea of Galilee is called the water bottle for all of Israel. It's highly protected by the Israelis, and it's coveted by the other Middle Eastern countries. As I mentioned before, if you look at this map and you look to the eastern part, the lightish orange and the different shades of orange, that's all desert. You don't see a lot of water there, do you? Not a whole lot of rivers and no lakes, and certainly no Sea of Galilee. So those nations really covet the land of Israel because of its source of water. Not only the Sea of Galilee, but the aquifer that lies underneath the surface of the land. So I mentioned before, but I'll mention it again. From the Sea of Galilee to the Dead Sea, the Jordan River covers 65 miles. You could drive that 65 miles in a little bit more than an hour, and yet the Jordan River meanders about 135 miles instead. In some places, it seems to cross over itself and tie itself in a knot and looks sort of like a pretzel. It definitely meanders. At the mouth of the Jordan River is the Dead Sea. As I mentioned, that's the lowest place on the surface of the earth at 1,400 feet below sea level. And it really is a dead end since it has no drainage outlet. A third of its content is salt. So if you were to wade into the Dead Sea, which many people do, I've been there myself, and walk in up to your knees and then lean back, you will float. You will have no choice but to float. And nothing lives in the Dead Sea except brine shrimp. The minerals from the hillsides erode into it. It's very, very hot there. Most days it's over 100 degrees Fahrenheit. So the water evaporates and it leaves behind salt and other minerals like potash that is shipped all over the world and is used for fertilizers. And the healthy mud of the Dead Sea is packaged up and sold worldwide. Interesting that it is thought that the cities of Sodom and Gomorrah lie at the bottom of the Dead Sea. So for just such a small country, Israel, its geography is varied and beautiful, and it certainly is a beautiful country. I'm going to stop there. I have a little small lesson on Nazareth and Bethlehem, but I think I'm going to do that as a separate lesson. Yeah, I'm going to do that as a separate lesson. So tune in for another lesson on Nazareth and Bethlehem. Have a great day.